everybody. This is Scott Goldsmith, and welcome to another show of Goldsmith Weighs In, The Harsh Truth. We are going to see if we can take a very complex and very scientific problem and see if we can bring it down to an understanding of what's going on with climate change today that affects all of us, and how it's linked to extinctions in the past, in Earth's past. And we're going to see if we can answer some of the questions that you may have on how we're going to navigate our way through this climate change crisis that we find ourselves in. We are in the anthropogenic extinction, and we're solidly in the sixth extinction now. And that's generally agreed upon by all the scientists. And the interesting thing is that no dominant species has ever made it out of a mass extinction event. And of course, we happen to be the apex dominant species, and I'd like to think that we could make it out of this one. The mass extinction events in the last 500 million years have actually extinguished 75 to 95% of all life on Earth during these mass extinction events. And if we reach 4 degrees Celsius, and we're already baked in about 2 degrees, no matter what we do, the Earth is only going to be able to support about 1 billion people, maybe only half of that. So we really have to see what we can do about tackling this climate change situation, and everybody coming together and seeing if we can come up with the answers we need. And the key word here is within time, because I know we got the answers. I know we have the technology. We definitely have the brightest people in the world. But right now we lack a lot of political will around the world, and I don't think that people realize that what we're fighting here is an invisible, relentless, lethal enemy here. So this is no small problem, and it's nothing that we should be taking lightly at all. So I'm going to bring on a world-renowned paleontologist from the Victoria Museum of Natural Sciences in Melbourne, Australia. This is Dr. Rolf Schmidt. He's a top invertebrate paleontologist in the world, one of them, and he's got a PhD in geosciences, and his focus has been on the evolutionary relationship between climate change and past extinctions. So we're going to learn a lot about what happened in the past, and then we're going to try to bring it up to the present and see if we can take a peek into the future and see what we may be heading into and what we might be able to do about it. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Schmidt to the show. Dr. Schmidt, are you there? How are things in Melbourne, Australia?
Yep, from Chile, Melbourne.
Chile? You're about 5 months ahead of us, I think. You're in the fall, correct? And we're in the spring.
Yes. It's just gone much colder than it was.
Yes. So, Dr. Schmidt, what I'd like to ask you is this. You've been studying extinctions for how long now?
Well, it's been one of my interests for a good 30 years now. They're quite prominent if you study any kind of evolution or geology. A lot of the geological periods are defined on when some extinction event happened. So we've known about them for a long time. So it's it's been not my main focus of research. Like, it's much narrower in I work on a certain group of animals, but they've also been affected by these. So that's always a link back to extinctions from my own personal research as well. So
gotcha. So 30 years, you've learned a lot. I know you're focused on certain areas of mass extinction, but we're in the sixth extinction now. Can I ask, what have you learned from the past extinctions that you've studied, and how is this extinction, in your opinion, different than the last 5 you've studied? Or
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, because in geology, we always say that the present is the key to the past, so we can observe processes today that explain what we see in the rocks, but the same way goes the other way, where things we've seen happen in the past are almost like these are like experiments to show what might happen in the future and currently. So in the big mass extinctions in the past, there's a few key lessons I think have come out in the last good century researching them. So one thing is the really big ones are not just due to one single cause. There's usually so many different things happening that basically cause extinction rates to shoot up beyond how species can evolve to the conditions. It's the rate of change. If it goes slowly, if it gets warmer slowly, let's say, animals can adapt. But if it goes fast, which quite a few of them were, they just can't compete with the.
they don't have the time to adapt. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the changes are, of course, environment, and usually it's climate change that causes it. It can go either way. It can go suddenly go colder, but yes, it's the rate of change that makes that difference. So in terms of what we're seeing today in our present time, those conditions definitely seem to be met. We have very rapid change that definitely, over the history of the human species, the last sort of few hundred thousand years has not occurred, even coming out of the last glacial stage. There are many pressures. It's not just global warming, it's pollution, it's land use change.
Deforestation.
Everyone's heard of deforestation, microplastics we're hearing about now.
Right.
And and so there's big parallels with the big five in that sense that it's definitely credible to be mirroring a big mass extinction in the current time.
In this sixth extinction that we're dealing with now, it's basically going at ecologically lightning speed, faster than these other extinctions unfolded over thousands, if not millions of years. Is that correct?
Sorry, I just dropped out for a second.
Yeah, I mean, the other extinctions unfolded over thousands, if not millions of years. We've been able to, since the 1500s, basically, change the world. When in 1900 we had 300 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere in 1900. By the time I was born in 1949, it was up to 300. I think it was 295 at 1900, and then it hit 300 parts per million in 1950. And now we're looking at 421 or 22, and if you add in the other greenhouse gases like methane and nitrous oxide, we're looking at maybe 442. That's almost exactly the same parts per million that they had in the Permian period of CO2 in the atmosphere. And they call that the Great Dying. So I think we're replicating, to the best of our ability, in lightning speed. May have taken millions of years to duplicate or to make the changes. And from what I understand as a layman is that the rise of CO2 or the decline of CO2 is basically, in 4 out of 5 of these extinctions, what is the catalyst or the initiator for the climate change that brings on mass extinctions. Am I correct in that?
That's good.
Basic.
The greenhouse CO2, because it is so it people often say, oh, it's such a tiny amount, but it is proven to be a greenhouse gas even at these tiny concentrations, and it's generally the amount itself is less important. It's the sort of, as we say, the doubling of the amount is what makes the difference. So a doubling of CO2 probably causes the equivalent of 2 degrees, give or take. So yeah, so if whatever the amount was initially, if you double it, it probably adds, let's say, 2 degrees of global warming. So if you start from, as you said, 280, we're well on track to doubling that. Similarly, let's say in the some of the earlier extinctions, it was maybe started from 500 parts per million, but it doubled to 1,000 quite quickly. That's definitely what happened, let's say, in the Permian, as you mentioned. So those spikes are caused by that. And we're basically sort of mirroring the natural causes. It used to mostly be gigantic volcanic eruptions that caused these events, like things called flood basalts. So during the end of the dinosaur reign, there were the so-called Deccan traps, which cover a good third of the Indian subcontinent in hundreds of cubic kilometers of lava at the time, and they were belching out all this CO2 and other gases. The big Permian, so the big Permian extinction had a equivalent big flood basalts in Siberia, which covered even bigger areas, and they lasted for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. And we're sort of adding equivalent greenhouse gas volumes in just centuries. And so that's an interesting one. Probably the only thing that was quicker than what we're doing was maybe the big asteroid that impacted at the end of the Cretaceous. But that by itself, as bad as it was, may not have been the full story. And these big flood basalts in India were already causing stresses. And it's particularly interesting to me because the animals that I research, these creatures called bryozoans, often called lace corals, they build colonies out of thousands of tiny little sort of millimeter-sized animals that grow into big colonies. But you can see from the size of these little boxes where the individual animals lived, roughly how the temperature has changed. The colder it gets, so that if the waters get colder, the animal chambers get bigger, and if it gets warmer, they get smaller. And just before the big impact happened, when we knew that big flood basalts were erupting, these fossils show that temperatures were going up and down like crazy. And that's, as we call it these days, climate chaos was probably happening due to this massive addition of CO2 from the Deccan traps. So the environment was already stressed before this big asteroid hit. So there's still debate going on about what the actual final sort of death stroke was for the...
Isn't it multiple things usually that compound to come together in a perfect storm that ends up
precisely
like they feel that maybe that meteor may have by the way, I think it was 30 kilometers across, I don't know how many, a trillion tons, big as the Empire
crazy.
State Building, 120 kilometer wide impact crater. So it was quite an event. But
yeah, I mean,
go ahead. After that event, they say that may have disrupted enough methane in the atmosphere, so when the hot billy balls came down, it ignited, a firestorm that, may have added to that. Are you looking for a healthier alternative to alcohol, but still want to be part of the party? You Betcha is the response of a lot of people who want a healthier drinking experience when it comes to relaxing and having a social beverage. You Betcha cannabis and herb-infused seltzer beverage is the answer to no regret partying. All the partying, but none of the downside. In fact, You Betcha is the healthiest drink on the planet that still gets you buzzed. No sugar, no calories. All ingredients are organically grown and and gluten-free. The benefits are lower blood pressure, lessened anxiety, reduced pain and inflammation, and a blissful feeling of relaxation. Clean, crisp, sparkling seltzer water combined with natural flavors like kiwi, strawberry, mango. You just have to try it to see how cool it is to drink something that not only makes you feel good, but is also good for you. Go to youbetchadistributors.com. That's youbetchadistributors.com. That's youbetchadistributors.com today. You'll thank us tomorrow. That catastrophe, So
yeah,
yes,
the simulations that you see are pretty damn scary because of just the violence of it. And it's interesting because these asteroids over the last sort of 500 million years, there have been quite a few big ones that have hit, but that one, as you say, that was by quite a bit the biggest one that has hit during that time. And it might have just been a critical size that caused enough damage, probably punctured right through the crust into the mantle. It also happened to hit a spot where there was a lot of rock formations, especially limestones and salt deposits, that when they got vaporized, they produced these extra toxic, so these extra gases produced by vaporizing that, like sulfur dioxides and other things that were especially prominent in blocking sunlight. So for about 10 years, it was probably a super nuclear winter. Yeah, exactly. And once that had rained out and come down again, the CO2 was still there. So you went from this super cooling to this super heating before it could come back in. So whatever survived the cold suddenly had to deal with the sort of a sauna almost. So it's that extreme fluctuation that would have been over just a few decades, quite a back and forth.
And how many years did it take for the world to repopulate its diversity after?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question because after a lot of these mass extinctions, there are things. There's a couple of distinct things, especially after big ones like the Permian mass extinction. There are sort of gaps in the rock record of what's called the reef gap and also a coal gap. So it means for quite a while, often millions, in the case of the Permian, I think more than 10 million years, there are no reefs anywhere. And there's also no coal deposited, which means there were no forests at all, basically.
No forest for 10
Plant
million
life.
years.
Yep. So there were probably plants, but they just weren't able to grow into big, luscious forests like we're sort of used to. And they are very distinct markers after the mass extinction that are recognized. And so these events really knocked out the ecosystems. And I think after the Permian, it took almost 100 million years for biodiversity to get back to what it was just before it. So basically into the Jurassic period. So there's a whole period called the Triassic after the so there's the Triassic period after the Permian, which was very everything struggled for the whole time. I mean, oxygen levels have dropped to half, like from about 30% down to 16% air.
That's like being on Mount Everest, right? That would be like being on Mount Everest today for the average species.
Exactly. And I mean, interestingly, there's a theory that because of such low oxygen levels, the dinosaurs that evolved at that time learned how to deal with low oxygen, and they had special types of lungs, which we can still see in the birds today, which are basically dinosaur descendants. And that's how they can breathe so well in such an energy intensive thing. So the stressed environment had a slight benefit in that sense, but you wouldn't have known it at the time, of course. But so during that whole period, there was a lot of the fossils we see are basically disaster taxa, as we call them. They're things Like these days, when we think, oh, what's going to survive, we think of cockroaches and rats and things like that. So it's the equivalent back then of just a few
Seagulls,
seagulls. So the
the generalists.
organisms, that's the generalists precisely, and so specialists are really hit hard. So you sort of alluded earlier to how will humans survive. So
That's what I was going to ask you. What
yeah,
are you
we're a
concerned
weird.
for? Are you concerned for humans with the sixth extinction? I mean, how concerned are you?
um, I sway back and forth between very and not so much, because humans are unique in, I'd say, not wanting to be sort of, oh, we are superior. It's just, I think it's the first time that a species has existed that is so intelligent to that level that we can see what's happening, we can actually deal with it,
We
and
understand the
at,
problem. Yep.
yeah, we're causing it, but we can also fix it. At the same time, of course, there's the parallel question of, well, we might survive as a species, but our our societies and like what we've sort of built now is actually fairly fragile in a way. We've compared to what maybe we were 10,000 years ago when I mean there was a major not mass extinction, but there was a big volcanic eruption that probably caused quite a, as they call, bottleneck in humans. The humans almost died out. It was like, I think,
I think 5 times they almost
70,
died out.
a few times. But yeah, so at that time though, we didn't have complex cities and
Right.
international trade and whatever else. So how we deal with that is, we're not particularly future proofed at the moment. So I think one of the things is, yeah, we need to not just try and fix what's happening, so it reduces in future, like limiting CO2 emissions. But as you said, we also need to probably prepare for what's already in the pipeline, the 2 degrees or whatever that's already coming inevitably, even if we stop completely with polluting and emitting. So
I
dropped
say
out.
we'd probably warm up for another 30 to 40 years just from the heat of the ocean for, another 30 or 40 years. But if we
Yeah.
stop, the sooner we stop, the easier it's going to be to try
Well,
to
that's
deal
it.
with whatever's coming our way.
The best thing would have been to stop uh, polluting, let's say, 20 years ago, but it's even better to
Right.
stop now than to stop it in 20 years' time. So whenever we
Exactly.
stop it is the way to do it.
Well, I like the analogy. I've always liked it myself of the Titanic. If they had seen the iceberg at 5 miles, they would have been able to make the turn. We would never talked about it. But they saw it at 3 miles and they couldn't make the turn, and 2/3 of the people died on the boat. So, right now,
It's
I think it's exactly the same thing. Do we have the time? Everybody's shooting for 2050 to be the point of getting to carbon neutral. And actually, I think we need to get there by 2040 or sooner if we can, so that we can turn this big boat within time to
yeah.
to avoid disaster. So I think it's a timing thing, and it was interesting to me to hear that scientists like yourself say every time we do a model, we have to go back and redo it because we're going so fast that the
Yeah.
old model statistics just don't hold anymore.
I mean, it's funny you use the Titanic as an analogy because it fits even more. So we've just had an exhibition of the Titanic at our museum, and one of the things they say is the captain had decided to go full steam, even faster than he should have.
Right.
And if they'd gone the
23
normal
knots.
speed and slower, yeah, they might have had a chance. So we're at the moment, even though we're being told actually rein it in, we're going, no, we're drilling more and we're digging up
Oh,
more and we're
Ralph, Dr. Schmidt, the five major oil companies and fossil fuel crude oil producers are planning to go from 85 million barrels of crude a day. By 2030, they're going to go up to 120, 125 million barrels a day. Now, just from my perspective, we're heading in the wrong direction.
It's a really tricky one. I mean, um, there's a good reason why I think the big IPCC reports that come out every few years, they're sort of divided into three sections. You have the solid science of what's really happening. You have the projections of what will be the impacts in the future. They're a lot more like, well, there's some uncertainties. And then you have the what do we need to do, which is very controversial, of course. But I think the tricky thing is, of course, we need, at the moment, the way everything is set up, we need sort of fossil fuel energy to build this new infrastructure. So in a way, all that old technology needs to be used to build up the new renewables, whatever they be they solar, be they nuclear, even. Um,
Yep.
but I know
That
a lot of places, and Australia's in that same boat, are still just getting fossil fuels out just purely to use as straight up energy by itself, rather than investing that energy into the transition. So
That's a very interesting perspective. I really
yeah,
like that. You need the old to create the new. I hadn't thought of it
yeah.
that way, and
I mean,
that's very true.
you probably used. I mean, you could say you used the old actual horses to build the new systems that built the fossil fuel based industry. So they didn't just build themselves. You needed the older systems for the new ones. So we will need that, but that in itself is, of course, polluting as well. So
Yeah,
it's a really rough one.
it's a timing thing. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got to get it right. And the trouble is, when you're dealing with something that you can't see, that you don't know how fast it's moving, that there's so much disinformation, and it's so polarizing. There's people that
Mm,
still, they just don't believe it. And
sorry.
most of those people are in America. They don't
Well,
believe it. And when you have that, it makes it difficult to get that political will to drive forward and get the coalition together around the world to get this thing solved. Uh, I am not as optimistic as you are. I think,
well,
looking at human nature, I kind of weep for the species when it comes to really good judgment. So I'm not sure. Will they make the decision to get there in time? I don't know. I think it's up in question.
I think human history probably is more on your side of pessimism than on.
Are you looking for a healthier alternative to alcohol, but still want to be part of the party? You Betcha is the response of a lot of people who want a healthier drinking experience when it comes to relaxing and having a social beverage. You Betcha cannabis and herb-infused seltzer beverage is the answer to no regret partying. All the partying, but none of the downside. In fact, You Betcha is the healthiest drink on the planet that still gets you buzzed. No sugar, no calories. All ingredients are organically grown and gluten-free. The benefits are lower blood pressure, lessened anxiety, reduced pain and inflammation, and a blissful feeling of relaxation. Clean, crisp, sparkling seltzer water combined with natural flavors like kiwi, strawberry, mango. You just have to try it to see how cool it is to drink something that not only makes you feel good, but is also good for you. Go to YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com today. You'll thank us tomorrow.
I feel, because I have young children, I feel I have
Optimistic.
to be optimistic. But they do. I hear it from them. They're quite distressed at times
Pessimistic.
about watching the way we're sort of putting the foot on the gas rather than on the brake at the moment.
Oh, yes. And I think at some point, they may decide to do it, but it's
Right.
going to be too late. That's my worry, is that they're going to say, oh, in 2035, oh, by the way, You know, we've already activated, Dr. Schmidt, 9 out of the 16 tipping points, they tell us, and a couple of them they say are irreversible, like Greenland and the Antarctic ice shelf, and a new study says that the AMOC current may stop as early as 2025. That's 6 months from now, up to 2040. So, you know, do you think that if these tipping points, and they're all, most of them interconnected, as you know, if that starts, that enters a whole new level of what you're talking about as adding on complex problems that come together to create a perfect storm that could knock us out of the box.
Yeah, that's it.
I like the analogy of the Rocky Mountain locust, which you've probably heard. Now, the Rocky Mountain locust was in the western part of North America, and in 1905, there were trillions of them. They would black out the sun. I mean, for miles and miles, trillions of them. By 1915, they were extinct. They were extinct, gone completely because of the change of their environment, the weather, and, you know, we were doing new farming conditions, and they were gone. Now, we got 8.5 billion people, and we're heading to try to get 10.5 billion on the planet as quick as we can. And I'm just saying, all this technology, that the Titanic had the latest that there was, all of this numbers of people that we have really doesn't put us in a safety zone. You know, people aren't going to be saying, you know, can I have a smartphone and a computer? They may be saying, can I get something to eat and some water? So I think that we may be more vulnerable than the average person realizes. And I hope I'm wrong.
Well,
I hope
I wish
I'm
I could
wrong.
say you're wrong, but I think the way we've set up our, especially our economy, I think, is very fragile. I mean, as we saw during COVID, when things started going wrong and places got isolated. I mean, here in Australia, we're very isolated, and when we didn't have a lot of the trade, we really started noticing that things couldn't come in quick. And so it's one thing to have a environmental catastrophe in one region where everyone else can help, but if everyone's experiencing it, then what happens? And so I think one thing that we should learn is this is everyone's problem, and we're a big community. We're all the same species. We all just want to get along, have a decent life, and that kind of thing. And and I do take a bit of an analogy from what we've learned about evolution. It used to be evolution was always sort of pictured as this competition between species and even among species, and red in tooth and claw, as somebody coined. But it's turning out that more often than not, it's about cooperation and sort of symbiosis and mutualism. Just everyone gets a bit of a benefit, and I think there's still a bit of an idea that we're all competing with one another, but I think that's going to be a bit of a downfall if we use that mind frame to stop cooperating. And maybe there's the new generation. They seem hopefully a bit more into just seeing good in each other rather than being sort of wary of other people. So I'm seeing it in my kids. They're fairly good at that, so I'm hopeful. But I mean, they're not adults yet, although my son's about to turn 18. Oh my goodness! So maybe there's still hope yet.
There's hope, and I think the young, if there is a solution, it's going to be with the young people that are going to drive it, pretty much. And you know, we got a lot to change. I mean, you know, we can't just keep doing unlimited consumption on a finite planet that only has so much. And they were saying if we did put 10.5 billion people on the planet, we'd really only be able to grow enough food for everybody to have about a bowl of rice a day. So I'm hoping that they can realize that overconsumption, overpopulation, deforestation, overfishing, overpolluting, over everything is just not the right path. We got to find that path that's less of all of that and done in a lot smarter way. And since we're all complicit, I mean, we all have a carbon footprint. And we all contribute to the problem. So it's going to take really everybody trying to do their little part. But we do have to have leaders, Dr. Smith, that believe in science. I mean, they actually, they're okay with it when it comes to electricity and the light bulb. When it comes to things like climate change or the tipping points, suddenly, or what fossil fuels. I mean, there's a reason that Mother Earth in her wisdom buried that stuff, dead organic materials, down at the bottom of the ocean and down below the ground and turned it into coal. That's a pretty nice, safe storage system. And we had a choice of steam cars, electric cars, and gasoline-powered cars. And if gasoline hadn't been so cheap back in 1905, we might be driving steam or electric cars. So, we just made a choice that was the easy route. So we're going to have to change a lot of what we do and how we do it. Or, we don't know beyond climate change the other things we have to deal with, like what's under all that ice. Is there a pathogen or is there a virus that we haven't been able to build our immunity up to? What happens when we are the only one of a lot less species on the planet? They're predicting 1 million species are going to be gone by 2050. And they just did the calculations. They said a minimum of 18 to 20% of all species will be gone by 2100. That's 74 years from now. And that's a blink of the eye. Not even a blink. It's less than a blink of the eye in ecological terms. So they got a lot of sorting out to do, and they don't seem to have that urgency that I'd like to see. And there are so many people on the other side that are invested so much. When your paycheck depends on it, you have a real trouble buying into, somebody else's point of view. And that seems to be the problem. There's so many people that have a vested interest in keeping the old program going that it's hard for the new guys to get that running room. I mean, so if you were to recommend a few things, and you said, okay, I've got the decision-making power, I'm in charge, they put me in charge, what would you have the world do?
Yeah, that's the tricky one to say. Like, I'll come back to what I said about the big IPCC reports, where they divide them into the 3 sections. And as you say, you wish everyone would agree on the science. And that first section, that is the solid science, that should be non-controversial. But because the solutions section, people feel threatened, their portfolio might be impacted. So they disagree with the solid science because of that. But people should be able to separate them. And the discussion about what needs to be done to solve the consequence of what the solid science is telling us, they're 2 separate things. And I understand ideologies are hugely different. Some people want market-based solutions. Some people want top-down government regulations. And I think and this is really very personal, and I honestly don't know if I'm right, but I think market-based ones have been tried for a while now, and they seem to either be too or not being sort of taken up, and then the next electoral cycle happens and they get cancelled. In a way, I think, let's say Norway is an interesting example because they made a huge amount of money because it was, I think, state owned, the fossil fuel industry there for decades. But they invested a lot of that money into a national sovereign fund that now is used to build the next generation of
Right.
systems, and things. So in their case, their their whole economy was initially based on having so much oil to extract, but they seen that's not the future, so they used that forward thinking. So I thought, thinking, if someone can do that like that, like, that's a good example of, um, both using the problem in a way, what causes the problem, for something, positive in the future. So, I think there's ways that there's examples we can draw on, but yeah, it's a
It's
tricky one, and I
complex.
know, I know there's like, all this debate about electric cars at the moment, which of course, um, has other problems. Although the battery technology, because it's so popular, is taking off so massively that next generation batteries are now existing that don't use toxic and ethically problematic things like cobalt and nickel. There's other batteries in some of the newer ones coming out of China, especially, that don't use those. So it's, some of the problems that come with. I mean, nothing's perfect, of course. Every solution has. It's like medicine. If it works, it probably has side effects. So any medicine we do for this climate problem will have some problems, but on balance, are they manageable compared to what they're solving? So, I think, yeah, it's again like many solutions. It's not just one solution. So some people say only do nuclear, or some people say only do solar, and I'm going, well, it depends where you are. Like, you wouldn't propose 100% solar energy if you're up in Alaska. So, that's it's yeah, you have to adapt to the local environments.
Let me ask you a question. I kind of been following the methane uh,
Mm.
problem for 20 years, and seems like there's more methane popping up in the Alaska and Siberia and
Siberia.
blowout holes and all that.
Yeah.
Ha- what do you think about that potential popping up and biting us? Is that
Well,
something that
there's
concerns you?
very much, because there is a moderately recent, shall we say, example of.
Are you looking for a healthier alternative to alcohol, but still want to be part of the party? You Betcha is the response of a lot of people who want a healthier drinking experience when it comes to relaxing and having a social beverage. You Betcha cannabis and herb-infused seltzer beverage is the answer to no regret partying. All the partying, but none of the downside. In fact, You Betcha is the healthiest drink on the planet that still gets you buzzed. No sugar, no calories, all ingredients are organically grown and gluten-free. The benefits are lower blood pressure, lessened anxiety, reduced pain and inflammation, and a blissful feeling of relaxation. Clean, crisp, sparkling seltzer water combined with natural flavors like kiwi, strawberry, mango. You just have to try it to see how cool it is to drink something that not only makes you feel good, but is also good for you. Go to YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com today. You'll thank us tomorrow.
Probably methane being, a cause of not one of the big five, but one of the lesser ones. There's, after the dinosaur extinction, um, climate was kept warming for quite a while. So the early, Cenozoic, or what used to be called the Tertiary, there was still warming going on, and it looks like, from geological record and everything we can see, there was a sudden spike, like massive spike, like more than we're probably expecting from our stuff. Very short, very sharp. And it's called the Paleocene Eocene thermal maximum. It's this boundary between two,
Yep.
geological stages, and it looks like that was caused by the sudden bubbling up of these methane hydrates, where methane on the bottom of the seafloor is frozen almost, but when the water gets too warm, it starts sublimating or whatever, and it bubbles up. And because methane is so many more times powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2, and then it oxidizes into CO2, so it keeps going.
Right.
That spike is very severe, and it did cause quite a few things to go extinct, especially in the oceans. And that might be a bit of an equivalent to today. I mean, the Permian mass extinction also has indications of massive methane spike. Possibly even there's an interesting theory that it was because a group of bacteria evolved the ability to very efficiently change carbon into methane. They're called methanogens. So they generate methane under no oxygen conditions. So when you have really warm climate off in the bottom of the ocean, because the ocean circulation gets so sluggish, the bottom of the ocean gets depleted of oxygen. And we're seeing that these days in some areas. I think in the Gulf of Mexico, there are expanding no oxygen zones. And so these bacteria somehow evolved this ability to do it really efficiently. And they probably just release this massive amount of methane just by metabolizing it. And so these are two different origins, but the result is the same. And we're doing it with, I don't know, cow burps and things like that.
Well,
So there are
there.
parallels to be aware of.
Well, what the background extinction rate is? What, one
Oh
animal
yeah.
in a species maybe every 1,000 years or something. I had read where we lost 22 species last year, and somebody did a report that said if you take snails and slugs and other animals that we don't like to pay attention to, that we've lost somewhere between 150,000 to 200,000 species since 1500. And in the last 100 years, we've lost quite a few, or since
Yeah.
1900. And the interesting thing about how fast we're going is that something like methane that is, if I understand it correctly, represents 10% of the biomass of the entire planet. That's a lot of bacteria or whatever you call it that's got the ability to spike up. And as humans, as mammals, we have a threshold zone. We're good from 8% more than our average warming capability up to 12. And after we hit over 12 degrees higher, I think the average human can only stay out in 95-degree temperature for 6 hours without hydration before we're
Oh yeah.
done. So, we have a threshold that's a lot less than most people realize. And if you get something like a methane spike, because we're melting all the ice over in Alaska that keeps it there, and the heat tracers that go in the ocean, and the ocean's the warmest that they've.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, we're losing the coral reefs as we speak, as you know. Worldwide coral bleaching for the 5th time. But once those heat tracers, it takes 20, 30 years to make it to the bottom of the ocean floor. But once it makes it down there, it can disassociate that methane, and we're talking about a lot of methane here. If that bubbles up, we could be in trouble just from that alone. Forget all the other 9 tipping points.
Yeah.
That could be a problem all by itself. So I I would really like to see, I'm a very comfortable person in 68-degree weather. And I live in Las Vegas where it's 115 degrees in the summer. So,
I mean,
North Canada is beginning to look really attractive.
That's a interesting point because you like I used to live in Adelaide here in Australia, which is hotter usually than Melbourne where I live now. But as you say, as they say probably in Las Vegas as well, yeah, but it's a dry heat. And if it's not humid, you can tolerate higher temperatures. So there's a concept called the wet bulb temperature where for the same temperature, if the humidity gets above a certain amount, your body cannot dissipate, or it cannot get rid of its own body heat and starts to heat up even the core temperatures. So as climate warms, it can hold more moisture as well, which increases, or it sort of actually makes the point at which the human body can't stay outside for long, as you mentioned, brings that level down. So what we used to think maybe, oh yeah, I can stay outside and what you say 115, it becomes 105. Maybe you can't stay. But to get back to you mentioned earlier about the extinction rates, which is an incredibly complicated thing to tie down. Even in the fossil record, we're still refining, because obviously not everything is fossilized. There are gaps here and there, so you're trying to count species, estimating them to see what the extinction rate is. And today, the difficulty is who's surveying every spot all the time to see how many species are there. Nobody is. So at the museum, we collaborate with some of the parks around the place to go there and do a snapshot of all the animals that live there at this time. And so we can come back in 10 years' time and see what is it now, like insects and birds and fish and mammals and all that stuff. So those kind of markers are important, but we need, like, obviously experts and funding to do that. So there's a limit to that. But at the same time, you can't count everything. Not everything is seen all the time. Sometimes you get it. So it's a very tricky thing to define, but it is very clear that there is things are vanishing. And interestingly, insects are especially affected at the moment. I've noticed, because I still have family in Adelaide. We drive there a couple of times a year.
No
And so
bugs on the windshield, right?
no more bugs on the windshield. We used to have to wash the car thoroughly, like
Right?
15, 20 years ago when we
No,
originally drove that distance,
no
500
bugs on the
miles.
lights, on the porch lights. Used to be
Exactly.
hundreds. I don't
And
see
it,
them. I don't see bats.
and that's the extra concerning bit, because again, as patchy as the fossil record is, those big five mass extinctions in the rock record, all those
They,
times when insects did exist, they generally didn't get too affected, except for the
right?
Permian. I think the Permian, they got hit pretty hard. Everything got hit, but the other ones, even like the end Cretaceous, where the dinosaurs died out, insects weren't as heavily impacted as other. So I
They,
think the
they,
fact that we're seeing such an impact today is extra concerning. And that might be a combination again of things like not just climate shifts, but also obviously we're pumping out a lot of chemicals that might be impacting them, pesticides, I guess, all those things. But yeah, insects are so very important. You don't want to lose them.
nope. I think they said that we've lost 3 billion birds
That's
since
correct, yeah.
1970 because the insect population has plummeted. You know, and I look around, and I don't see them around my house anymore. I mean, on the spring, you couldn't look at the light. There were hundreds of them. You don't
Mm,
see them. The bats, we used to see bats chasing the bugs. The
hmm.
bats aren't there anymore. The robins, used to see a robin or two in the yard. You don't see them anymore.
Yep.
And, you know, that's indications that if you just look around of what the changes are having an effect on species right around us. And, you know, uh, once those species go, it's going to, if they pull out enough species, it will impact us. Everybody on the
Mm,
planet will be impacted. In fact, you know what people don't really realize, Dr. Schmidt, is that their life is already being impacted by climate change, whether they admit it or not. There's
hmm.
the extreme weather events that are disrupting the food supply chain, and their prices are going up. They're complaining about it, but part of it is because of precipitation and the weather patterns are changing. Makes it a lot tougher for these farmers to figure out how to grow and harvest food. So, you know, they got an earlier spring by 11 to maybe as much as 27 days. And that's affecting, birds are trying to feed their young at the wrong time. They're not making
Yeah.
it through.
Yeah.
Warming oceans are bleaching and killing out the coral, of course, around the globe. We all know that. And that's the incubator of all life in the ocean. 70% of all marine species come from coral reefs. We get rid of that, I'm not sure that we're not a long way behind it. I think
Yeah.
one third of the women say they're going to plan on having fewer children. So it's affecting fertility. Property, they may not be able to get insurance if they're on the coast or if they're in a flood zone. You have an increased chance of getting impacted by a pandemic or a vector-borne illness like ticks and mosquitoes. They love this weather. And so we got West Nile virus now in Vegas, we never had it before.
Yeah.
Heat waves. They had a heat dome over North America, Canada, and the north, the far north, northwest. Are you looking for a healthier alternative to alcohol, but still want to be part of the party? You Betcha is the response of a lot of people who want a healthier drinking experience when it comes to relaxing and having a social beverage. You Betcha cannabis and herb-infused seltzer beverage is the answer to no-regret partying. All the partying, but none of the downside. In fact, You Betcha is the healthiest drink on the planet that still gets you buzzed. No sugar, no calories, all ingredients are organically grown and gluten-free. The benefits are lower blood pressure, lessened anxiety, reduced pain and inflammation, and a blissful feeling of relaxation. Clean, crisp, sparkling seltzer water combined with natural flavors like kiwi, strawberry, mango. You just have to try it to see how cool it is to drink something that not only makes you feel good, but is also good for you. Go to YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com. That's YouBetchaDistributors.com today. You'll thank us tomorrow. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It killed 1 billion animals that actually got roasted in the water in their shells. So it's affecting us today, and we got more frequent forest fires. Food supplies are becoming a little more dicey and insecure.
Yeah, I heard the worst news I heard about food supply is that the cost of chocolate is going to go up like 3 or 4 times, ruined by massive climate events. And I thought, if I can't have my comfort food, how can I deal with the climate crisis?
And what about beer? If they mess with our hops and the price goes up, there's going to definitely be riots over that. And, of course, we got regional conflicts now, a lot of migration.
Yes.
So people are
Climate
being impacted
refugees.
today. It makes you wonder what's going to happen if it's this dicey right now. Where are we going to be in 20 years?
Yes.
So that's kind of the whole idea. I'm going to give you my thoughts on what should be done to help get us on the way to solve the problem, and then you can tell me how wrong I really am. I think there should be no new fossil fuel projects, period. Live with the ones we got. No new ones. Put on a big push with that money you're talking about for 100% renewables. Double the carbon efficiency in every sector that's out there. Every one. I don't care if it's, agriculture, mining, transportation, aviation. Double the efficiencies in all sectors of the economy. Reduce unbridled consumption by half. Reduce the work week to 4 days. That way we got less money to consume, and we reduce consumption. And if we can do that by getting our efficiencies up to 40 to 50% in all sectors of industry, transportation, and agriculture, and limit the number of children to 1 or 2 till we solve this problem. If we did just that, we may be able to figure our way through to sustainability and a brighter, more sustainable future. We really shouldn't be trying to support 2 billion more souls on the planet while the carrying capacity or our ability to feed those people is projected to drop by 15 to 30% in the next 20 years. That sounds like less food with more people, and a real recipe for conflict. So there you go. That's my recipe for trying to get through, to the other side. What do you think?
I'd say that ranges from I agree 100% to, oh, it might be
Maybe, huh?
some discussion. So fuel efficiency or energy efficiency, that is I think the absolute low hanging fruit that we've got the technology to be more than 50% more energy efficient. And it's in some sectors, it's going the other way. I'm looking at cars that are getting bigger again, which is so bizarre, like petrol cars or gas cars. And yeah, I think that 100% that has to be mandated. Our government here has introduced a very sort of tentative bit to increase fuel efficiency in cars, and it's got a massive pushback from the opposition here, the I guess the
Right.
equivalents of your Republicans that
Right,
on the
right, right.
conservative side, which is ironic. I mean, it would reduce running costs for people, which right now in a crisis of like where people have less money to spend, having having to spend less money to run your car and your house should be looked on as a benefit. But yeah, that I completely agree. The population thing is a one that's a really tough one because, as you said, I think in most sort of highly developed countries like the US and Australia and Europe, people are already having a lot fewer kids, like below replacement levels. So most of them are below two kids on average per adult. So the countries where it's growing are the developing ones, like well, India, I guess, and yeah, they've just taken first place. But per capita, I guess they have a lower carbon footprint than say, like if there were, even though I try to recycle and be efficient, I still have a massive carbon footprint compared to someone that lives probably anywhere, let's say in Africa or India, and
Yeah.
so I wouldn't want 10 billion people of me. So I think if we can combine our lifestyles being lower footprint and helping other countries to, because population growth is often when you don't have the let's say the guarantee that all your kids are going to survive, or you need them to help support you in your old age because there's no other systems in place. So if those countries can sort of reach more our level of security and education and empowerment of women, that probably the population growth will come down by itself. And I think we can, with better agricultural technologies, dare I say, even genetic modifications and things like that, we can probably feed, let's say, up to 10 billion. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is possible. But yeah, we can't just let it run rampant as it is at the moment. I think you're right with that. So, but otherwise, it does. I'm always wary with saying, "Oh, we need to bring populations down," because having grown up in Germany, I'm always slightly wary of having that slight eugenics vibe in my solutions. So, I think
Right.
I think we can tweak the impact of the big population maybe in ways that will eventually see it coming down, but not in the meantime. Yeah, efficiencies, less the disposable lifestyle that we have of like a new phone every year and stuff like that.
I don't see the population coming down a lot as long as most of the people in South America are Catholics and most of the ones in Africa and Middle East are Muslims. And they want all the kids they could possibly have. I don't see, but hopefully people are making better decisions. I myself think, would I want to bring in a child right now, knowing what I know? Thank God I'm not young and optimistic. Let me read you something from the International Monetary Fund paper. They say the risk of irreversible disaster is. This is from the International Monetary Fund, a paper they put out. It says the risk of an irreversible disaster or irreversible global warming is rising very fast, with the potential for an infinite amount of financial costs that will go along with unmitigated climate change and a certain outcome with the business as usual trajectory that we are currently on. It could mean, in the extreme, could mean our own extinction. Now that's the IMF. That's the International Monetary Fund, and they got the smartest people on the planet working for them or advising them. If they put that out, and they're smart people, I think
very
I should
conservative.
be more scared.
Yeah.
I think I should be more scared than I am. All right, so that's basically what I kind of wanted to get my hands around in this show. Where were we back then, which you represent 100% and studied for 30 years? Where are we today? And we know that we got a lot less bugs on the windshield. And where are we heading into the future? We know that if we stopped all emissions right now, we still got a 30 to 40 year problem, but it'd probably be a lot less dire consequences and much easier to deal with for all of humanity if we could turn that fossil fuel spigot off, go to nuclear, go to wind, go to solar, go to ocean, whatever they can come up with that doesn't, I grew up in a world, Dr. Schmidt, that wasn't out to kill me. I mean, it was a beautiful world in Idaho, in Boise, and my dad went out hunting pheasants in the backyard, and we went and picked up fish and frogs in the creek. So the natural world was a great thing. I'd like to see it stay for the next couple of generations so they can enjoy it as well. And that's kind of, I think we're heading into times that just need a lot more. Hey, remember that song? I don't know if you remember in the 60s where it said, hey, stop, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. That was a great song. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. Stop, hey, what's that sound? It's invisible, it's lethal, it's heading right at us. What took millions of years in previous extinctions is now happening in tens of years. And species simply cannot keep up with that kind of rate of exchange. And a world with 20% less animals and species is a world that is diminished for the next generation. It's diminished. And I just hope that we can figure ways to lessen that impact. Somehow, some way, at some level, the governments that run this train and blow the whistle have got to get an idea that this is a much more urgent crisis than anybody really, the average person or the politician really realizes, because they haven't studied it for 30 years like you have. And if you dig into it, it gets a little scary pretty quick. So, Dr. Schmidt, I cannot tell you how much pleasure it has been to and have you give us your point of view and kind of kick things back and forth, because that's what we're looking for, is a common middle ground that might lead its way through to a sustainable future. And I just think that there's no more important subject on the planet for humanity and a million other species than what you and I just talked about. I hope the audience takes something away from it that they didn't know before and gets a renewed enthusiasm towards writing or calling people who are supposed to represent them and say, hey, watch this podcast with Dr. Rolf Schmidt. He will tell you what's going on, and maybe you ought to listen up.
Yeah, I mean, whatever can help. I think the thing to remember as well is scientists tend to be very cautious and, shall we say, conservative in how we how we
Frame things.
frame things. So if there are scientists going, holy moly, this is really getting out of hand, you'd want to listen to them. We don't usually, yeah, we usually couch things in, oh yeah, maybe, and this is probably certain, oh, this is maybe, but now we're going, no, this is now certain. Then yeah, yeah,
And the
yeah.
IMF is a pretty conservative body too,
If
probably.
they're
So
going, yes.
you take scientists in the IMF, and I got articles from Smithsonian and
Yeah.
Science Daily and
Seen things in The Economist.
oh, and yeah, and they're all going, hey, you know what? Time to stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look
Look
what's
around.
going down, and maybe do a little more about it. So, Dr. Schmidt, my gratitude. 2 wars, millions of migrants illegally crossing our borders, social divide and civil unrest, 35 trillion in debt and counting. Now is the time to get better prepared for any emergency that could disrupt the food supply chain or shut down the power grid. Sustainability Systems makes being prepared super easy and very affordable. For just $1 a day, $29.95 a month, they'll send you a full bucket of 52 delicious meals with a 25-year shelf life every quarter until you have enough food in reserve to take care of the entire family. They also have complete packages with solar generators that you can easily pay for over 12 to 24 months. Food is life. This is living insurance for only $1 a day. Go to yourlifeboat.net. That's yourlifeboat.net. Or call us at 1-800-713-4628. That's 1-800-713-4628. And please don't delay. Do it today. Trouble always comes when you least expect it. Are you looking for a healthier alternative to alcohol, but still want to be part of the party? You Betcha is the response of a lot of people who want a healthier drinking experience when it comes to relaxing and having a social beverage. You Betcha cannabis and herb-infused seltzer beverage is the answer to no regret partying. All the partying, but none of the downside. In fact, You Betcha is the healthiest drink on the planet that still gets you buzzed. No sugar, no calories, all ingredients are organically grown and gluten-free. The benefits are lower blood pressure, lessened anxiety, reduced pain and inflammation, and a blissful feeling of relaxation. Clean, crisp, sparkling seltzer water combined with natural flavors like kiwi, strawberry, mango. You just have to try it to see how cool it is to drink something that not only makes you feel good, but is also good for you. Go to youbetchadistributors.com. That's youbetchadistributors.com. That's youbetchadistributors.com today. You'll thank us tomorrow. And appreciation for you taking the time out of your really busy schedule and your weekend to spend an hour or so with us, and I hope that millions of people around the world get a chance to see this and listen to it, and hopefully they get a good takeaway that says, hey, Mars is 160 degrees during the daytime in the summer, and it's 70 degrees below zero at night, and it's not a good substitute for this beautiful planet that we have. And we should take as good a care of it as we possibly can.
Isn't that another song? Mars ain't the place to raise your kids. Is that some Elton John song? Yes.
Yes. I think we should pull out all the stops to protect what we have. The oceans, how do you replace that? How do you put a price on 70% of the species in the oceans? You can't do it.
For all we know, this is the only planet in the galaxy that has such a complex, diverse ecosystem on it. We don't know of anywhere else that's as suitable.
And every time Mother Nature hits one of these mass extinctions, it takes another 100 million years to bring it back. And they say back in one of the first or second extinctions, we actually had more animals on the planet, more species than we do today.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, but it's hard to know because, of course, fossils get more and more scarce the further back. I think it is true that there was more sort of diversity in the sense of weird groups that have been wiped out since then. So there's
it may be true and I may be wrong.
No, no. I mean, I think that's maybe what that was getting at. That yeah,
Right.
there's every time a big group, so let's say the dinosaurs, and of course they still exist as birds, but most of the dinosaur groups have been wiped out, never to be back again. So that
Yeah.
diversity is gone. So
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
don't bring that back.
And when a body of any species goes, there's usually a lot that goes with them.
Mm,
And,
yeah.
hopefully we can save some of them or as many as possible and lose as few as possible. But
Yep.
Dr. Schmidt, you've been wonderful to give us your time. I appreciate it
Thanks
more
for
than you
inviting me
know.
on.
And we may do this again next year.
See what's happened in the meantime.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for having
Thank
me
you
on.
very much. You take care.
You too. Have a good day.
And do they really say put a shrimp on the Barbie?
Oh goodness, that's I think that's more a cliche. Here drinks Foster's beer either.
Oh, they don't? I love
No,
Foster's beer.
we export all of those.
That was one of my favorite beers.
Oh, it's all right.
What do you drink over there? Guinness?
Oh, sometimes, but usually I like Cooper's, which is a South Australian brand. That's what I used to drink.
Yeah,
There, they've got a nice extra stout.
yeah. I've never heard of it. I'll look for it. We
Yeah,
got these things called Total Wine. They got everything.
they got everything.
Yep. I'll look
All
for it.
right.
Cooper's. Dr. Schmidt, thanks again. I appreciate it. Your vast store of knowledge really made the show take it to a different level than it would have been without you. So thank you very much.
I enjoyed it.
Take care. Now, folks, that's about the show. I appreciate everybody who's listened in. It's a fascinating, very complex problem. It's something that everybody's got to make their own decision on just how much carbon footprint they want to have and who they want to elect for their representative. But this should arm you with more knowledge than you would have had without the show. I hope so, anyway. So I wish everybody a long life and a good, sustainable life. And I hope we're all going to figure out this problem. And in the next 20 years, and we can get to carbon neutral by 2040 or 2035 instead of 2050, which in my opinion is just 10 years too late. It's kind of like the Carpathia making it to the Titanic an hour and a half after it sank beneath the waves. It just couldn't save those 2/3 of the people. We got to get this done within time. That's the key word here. So hopefully this arms you with some ammunition that you can discuss and maybe use. Thank you so much. I'm Craig Scott Goldsmith. This is Goldsmith Weighs In, The Harsh Truth. We'll see you next time.